Before the video starts, I would like to take the time to acknowledge some sad news within the Disney community. The incredible voice actress Russi Taylor passed away on July 26th. You may not have heard of her, but you have definitely heard her as Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck's nephews, Martin Prince, and various other characters on The Simpsons like Sherry and Terry, and as the original baby Gonzo. Russi, thank you for the memories. May you rest well, and may you and Wayne be together again. I would also like to take the time to zoom out of the Disney microcosm to remember the victims of gun violence at the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, downtown Dayton, Ohio, and across Chicago, Illinois. Maybe I'm late in uploading this video and this may not be quote-unquote relevant to the news cycle anymore, and I understand that the world has to turn eventually, but at the risk of sounding political, I am angry that our government doesn't seem to care, and I am deeply upset by this loss of life. I hope that this brief acknowledgement and a silly little video about fandom shows that someone out there cares. As a YouTube channel dedicated to Disney and all things relating to the Walt Disney Company, that includes Walt Disney Animation, Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, so that's Star Wars and Indiana Jones, the theme parks, and yeah, now Fox. And also the Muppets. But, yeah. So, like, this seems to be the general attitude that a lot of fans have, and even Bob Iger seems to have. When I suggested that my friends come with me and my girlfriend to see the Muppet movie's 40th anniversary, a lot of them were just kind of like, if you go, I'll go, and they ended up not going. This sort of attitude kind of confuses me because the Muppets used to be these big icons of pop culture, and I guess they're not anymore. And I guess things all just really kind of went downhill when Jim Henson died, because they never really recovered, and it's almost because no one knew how to move forward, and frankly, I don't really blame them. So the Muppet performers were left without their leader, but they couldn't leave the Muppets without their leader in Kermit. So Jim Henson passed along the duties of performing Kermit to Steve Whitmire at the time, and even then, it still kind of felt like no one knew how to move forward, because they tried. They played it safe by doing adaptations of literary classics like Christmas Carol or Treasure Island, and they kind of went back to basics by doing a sort of Muppet show for the 90s called Muppets Tonight, and that's how you got characters like Pepe the King Prawn, who seems to be the only Muppet that they will acknowledge from that time period, and they were doing pretty fine. Then Muppets from Space happened. I don't know if we talk about Muppets from Space, but the point is they were struggling, and they continued to struggle, and Disney bought them with Michael Eisner at the time, because that was like his white whale that he really wanted for the company. And then they continued to struggle, because Disney didn't really utilize them that well. I mean, there was the occasional TV special, but not a whole lot. Aside from the struggle, or maybe this causes the struggle, there are nostalgic audiences who have their ideas of what Kermit, Fozzie, and the rest of the Muppets should be, and it tends to clash with what the writers think, and I'm pretty certain this killed their relaunched movie career, and I'm also pretty certain this is part of the reason that killed their relaunched TV career. It's kind of interesting and frustrating all at once, because when Marvel fans and Star Wars fans cry foul, and one of them does it way more than the other one, those franchises and movies are still allowed to exist, people still go to them, they are surefire bets all the time. Well, not all the time. But when Muppet fans cry foul, the Muppets as a franchise seem to just shut down and curl up into a ball, and they roll back to the drawing board. For who knows how long, because I'm pretty sure they're still at the drawing board at this point. But to speak of their really recent run of movies, 2011's The Muppets and 2014's Muppets Most Wanted, I am grateful that I was alive to see Muppet movies in theaters, and I think they're closest to those original movies that they made back in the 70s and 80s. So I love them for that. The 2011 movie is just pretty near and dear to my heart because it showed the public that the Muppets never really quite lost it. They never quite lost that spark. It was always just kind of in there, buried beneath everything, and yeah, it put them back into the public eye. And I think Frank Oz, who was the original performer of Fozzie and Piggy, called it retro, but I think it had to be retro to kind of remind people of the Muppets. It did really well critically, it did really well financially, and it won an Oscar, so naturally it led to another movie.
We're doing a sequel. There's no need to disguise. The studio considers us a viable franchise.
That did not age well.
We're doing a sequel. The studio wants more. While they wait for Tom Hanks to make Toy Story 4.
And of course Toy Story 4 kind of got them back when they called the frog toy Rainbow Connection. And a lot like the 2011 film, it did well critically, but not quite as well financially. I personally blame the release dates, because the 2011 film was released in November, so they got the Thanksgiving crowd, they got the Christmas crowd, and even that late New Year's crowd. But Muppets Most Wanted was released in like March or something, and yeah, springtime is just a notoriously slow time for the movies until like May hits. And so, disappointing box office returns definitely killed the Muppets. Or so we thought! The fandom rejoiced when ABC announced they were bringing the Muppets back to television for a mockumentary series in the style of The Office or Parks and Recreation.
God bless America and its magnificent broadcasting company.
And then it came out, and it was met with a very, very mixed response. When this series came out in 2015, a lot of people saw the potential, myself included. Even if the writing wasn't always super strong, I appreciate it for doing things with the Muppets that were only ever attempted before in the movies. Having the Muppets in the real world, whether that was a shot of Kermit and Piggy just continuously walking down an office without stopping, or Eric Jacobson performing both Piggy and Fozzie opposite himself. The first time anything like that was ever attempted was in the very first Muppet movie when Jim Henson did a duet with himself as Kermit the Frog and Ralph the Dog. I guess Jim Henson really liked that og sound. A lot of criticism at the show was pointed at the more adult humor that kind of flew over kids' heads, and I guess these people who were complaining about it just really missed that wholesome, family-friendly content that you could find on the original Muppet Show.
The end of sex and violence on television.
I would just like to say a few words about nudity.
Holy maracas! I love you, baby! Trust in me when I say it's cold outside.
In fact, I think you're very sexy.
Say again.
I think you're sensational.
Son of a bitch!
What the hell was that all about?
Yep, totally wholesome, totally family-friendly. What, did you think they were Sesame Street characters? Because they're not.
Oh, Mr. Green Frog! Elmo help! Elmo help, Mr. Green Frog!
Okay, most of them are not. Luckily for most fans, they changed showrunners halfway through the first season, with that potential slowly being realized. A lot of people cite the episode Going Going Gonzo as the true return to form. That later half of the season, after that Gonzo episode, felt like a good way to move forward but honor the Muppets' past, which is what a lot of us wanted to see. Kermit and Piggy were about to get back together, and then the show got canceled. So because it got canceled, Kermit and Piggy are still separated to this day, which is an angle that they still run with during interviews. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if you complained about this show, are you happy now? Are you happy that you kept one of the most iconic couples in Hollywood apart? Are you happy? The Muppets have had really no major projects since then. Muppet Babies is pretty popular, and I heard they were ordered for a third season. That'll include the Swedish Chef, Sweetums, and the return of Scooter's sister Skeeter. So that's pretty cool. But the Muppet Babies have always felt more like an offshoot of the Muppets than the Muppets actually doing anything. They still have Muppet Vision playing at Walt Disney World, but that's been there since the 1990s. They have a show at Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World where they reenact moments in American history. It's a cute show, and it's actually one of the only places you can hear Steve Whitmire currently as Kermit. Kermit made an appearance at a music festival this weekend singing Rainbow Connection. The Electric Mayhem has made a music festival appearance in 2016, I believe it was, at the Outside Lands. Kermit was in a play last December where he announced that the Muppets have something planned for this year.
All right, Kermit, what's next for you?
Well, we've got a big surprise planned for the new year. I tell you what it was, but I don't know what it is either.
He hasn't said what it is yet. I think the biggest thing is that they had a live Muppet show at the Hollywood Bowl. I'm wearing that shirt, Muppets Take the Bowl. They also took a version of this show to London, so I guess that's been the main thing. Utilizing the Muppets' unique existence as fictional characters who also exist in our space and live in our world in a way that, Mickey Mouse doesn't really quite live in our world. Props to Disney for that, but what's their next big thing? A movie would be too big of a risk because the last one didn't make a lot of money. A TV show would be too big of a risk because the last one got canceled. I mean, their digital content that they used to put up on YouTube did really well. Their Bohemian Rhapsody cover went viral. But when's the last time anyone's heard from the Muppet YouTube channels?
9 months?
If only there were some sort of platform where Disney had their own original content that the Muppets could use.
Disney Plus.
What? Sounded like the people that watching this that keep up with what the company does said something from behind the screen. What did you guys say?
Disney Plus.
Oh, you guys said Disney Plus. Yeah, I can see that working. I think Disney Plus would be perfect for the Muppets. So Disney has 4 of their own Muppet movies that they own the full complete rights to. Then they have the ones that they recently acquired the home video rights to when they acquired the Muppets. And then they have the TV specials that they did. And of course they have the 2015 show and the 90s show. And the first 3 seasons of The Muppet Show that have been cleared for release. And it seems like the 4th season was cleared for release, even though we don't have the DVD yet. And I don't understand why, because they've got the Star Wars episode in Season 4, and that would be perfect for Disney+. And whenever Season 5 gets cleared, you could have that. And just that in itself is a decent amount of Muppet content. I mean, bringing the Marvel and Star Wars fans back into it, they're getting their own original content. They're getting Clone Wars Season 7 and MCU shows that tie back into the greater MCU. But if you have Marvel and Star Wars creating some new content, why not let the Muppets create some new content? So you could do some shorts or something, but it also sounds like there is a series in the works with Josh Gad that takes place after Muppets Take Manhattan, but I don't know if that's official because it hasn't been announced yet, but let's just assume that's happening. Because, yes, and if that's the case, then why not throw Muppets Take Manhattan on there? But I mean, there are also tons of other things they could do. They could do a continuation of the 2015 series, because a lot of people loved that concept. They could do a revamped Muppet show, like classic Muppet show. They could do live-action remakes, but except they cast the Muppets as the Disney characters. I would probably actually watch live-action remakes like that. You don't understand. I know that doesn't guarantee that people will stop what they're doing and subscribe to Disney Plus just because of the Muppets, but I mean, think about how many times you are on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime Video or wherever you watch your content, and you were just bored, not knowing what to do, and then you were recommended your new favorite show or your new favorite movie, and now you can't stop talking about it, or you couldn't stop recommending it to people. And think about how many times that could happen if Bob Iger just wants to remember that they own the Muppets. Let's assume that the Josh Gad series is true and they've got a series out of the way. What would a new movie entail? Well, I've personally really been wanting them to do a Muppet superhero movie that would poke a lot of fun at the genre, especially since Disney owns the big juggernaut, no pun intended, of that genre that specializes in movies that deal with superheroes. And since no Muppet movie is complete without cameos, I think because Disney owns Marvel, that would be such an easy way to get cameos in. I'm a little upset that this didn't happen before Stan Lee's passing, because no Muppet movie is complete without cameos, and what better cameo than from the king of cameos? Regardless of Stan, there are still some amazing cameos that could happen that could easily play into corporate synergy. I mean, a scene with Kermit the Frog and Mark Ruffalo would just write itself. Imagine the fangirls you would get into those seats if they find out that Tom Holland, Tom Hiddleston, or any of Hollywood's Chris's are in this movie. Because I would go to this movie if one of the Chris's is in this movie, even just for 10 seconds. I just want to see Chris Evans interact with Kermit the Frog at some point in my life on screen, please. There is another project that I think would be amazing for Disney Plus, or even if they go to splurge on a theatrical release for it, I'd love to see that too. In 1985, Jim Henson, Frank Oz, and Jerry Jewell came together and wrote the script for the cheapest Muppet movie ever made. And here's what Jerry Jewell had to say about it.
There was a project for a Muppet movie that we kept returning to. Jim and I worked on it and just loved it. It grew out of the fact that Jim was talking about finances, and if we did another Muppet movie at the time, it would need to be done inexpensively since we were using bigger and bigger budgets for all our other projects. So we conceived of a movie slated as the cheapest Muppet movie ever made. That was the original working title, and that later became the subtitle with the title along the lines of Into the Teeth of the Demons of Death. The idea being that this was a film that Gonzo directed. Kermit was too busy, so when Gonzo asked, Kermit said, "Sure, go ahead. I can't take on responsibilities behind the scenes at this time, but I'll perform in it." So Gonzo wrote this cheesy, terrible plot that made absolutely no sense whatsoever about something being stolen that led to a chase around the world. Unfortunately, Gonzo blows half the movie's budget on the opening titles, so as the film progresses, it gets cheaper and cheaper, where they're using a shot of the same street corner for every city in the world.
This movie sounds amazing and hilarious, but it feels like there's almost no chance of this being made. Except for the fact that Frank Oz is still alive. In a Reddit AMA, this is what he had to say.
When Dick Cook was head of Disney, he asked me to get involved with the Muppet movie. So, because the previous script was dated from being written 40 years ago, I did rewrite it with the help of Jim Lewis. And personally, I love it, and I wish it could be made. But maybe its time is now gone because it feels like Disney would like to go their own way.
Mr. Oz, with all due respect, every single time you talk about the Muppets, there seems to be this inherent sadness. When you talked about the 2011 movie, you said it was retro and it had a little bit of heart, but you would have liked them to push boundaries and go farther. When the 2015 series came out, it went a little too far, and you said you would have liked it to have some more heart. It feels like you're the only one who knows how to steer the ship because you worked so closely with Jim, and please, just come back for one more project or something. Come back and perform Yoda for a movie that is deemed as polarizing by a lot of members of that fan community, and a lot of people just seem to just spew hate and toxicity all over. Don't you think you could come back and be involved somehow for a project, for a fan base that would appreciate it on some level? I can tell you that I have seen clips and episodes from the Muppet Babies revival that's so clearly aimed at preschoolers, but I watch it because it's the most consistent form of Muppet content that's come out since the series got canceled, and I know I'm not alone on that one. Hi, Matthew. Please, Mr. Oz, just, if you can, just email Bob Iger every day. I know Jason Segel kind of had to pester Disney to even make his Muppet movie, but please, just, I know that I would appreciate anything that you would be involved in with the Muppets again, and so would so many other people. I know you said that it feels like Disney wants to go their separate ways and they haven't asked you to do anything yet. And to Disney, all I have to say to that is why. Why have you not asked this man to do anything with the Muppets again? If there's anyone who knows how to restore the Muppets back to their Jim Henson glory days, it's the man who has worked with Jim Henson. Same goes for Dave Goelz, who has originated the characters of Gonzo and Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and still plays them to this day. Even if Frank Oz doesn't come in and direct a new movie, just bringing him in and having him and Dave Goelz come in and mentor a new staff of writers or something would go such a long way in kind of restoring what the Muppets used to be, and not only that, but ensuring their place in pop culture now and making them more than just nostalgia and the Rainbow Connection. That's all I have for now. I will see you real soon. Keep believing and keep pretending.